Chapter 336. Getting Closer to Sky Mist. Su Ming's answer made the boy's originally bloodless face instantly be filled with red. Soon, a howl filled with anger left his lips. That howl was piercing to the ears, and it was a show of just how terrified he was in his heart. In the distance, Wu Duo took in a sharp breath. With a blank stare, he looked at Su Ming, calmly ignoring the boy's struggles and screams as he continued stuffing the herbs into his wounds. As time passed by, Su Ming's speed increased. After the burning of half an incense stick, he placed the final herb into the body, and right after, he lifted his right hand and patted the boy's body in the air. Immediately, strange wiggling bumps appeared bizarrely on the boy's stomach. "I won't forgive you. Even if I die, I will turn into a vengeful spirit and take revenge on you." The boy's face was twisted in endless hatred. He glared at Su Ming and let out a piercing shriek. "You won't turn into a vengeful spirit, because once I finish refining your body, even if your spirit still exists, you will only exist within my medicine." As Su Ming retorted coldly, he lifted his right hand and pointed at the sky. Immediately, lightning arcs began swimming in his palm. As all those plants started growing on the boy's body, a large amount of aura of death spread from his body and into the area. However, that aura of death was not enough to attract lightning to fall. Before this, Su Ming had always needed to gather the aura of death to create spirit plunder. Even if it was just some time ago, he still needed to ask his second senior brother to bring additional aura of death to aid him. Yet after the last time he created spirit plunder and gained some further understanding towards his origin lightning, he had mastered a way for him to bring down lightning even without having the aura of death around. If gathered a large amount of earth and lightning on himself, then the invisible void lightning would naturally rush towards him. The instant they touched each other, they would turn into a sight of lightning falling on him. What if? What if you fail? Just as Su Ming was about to call upon lightning, Wu Duo, who was standing in the distance, hesitated for a moment before he asked, "If I fail?" Su Ming lifted his left hand and pressed it against the boy's head, who was glaring at him ferociously. The boy let out a piercing screech, but his shivers betrayed the indescribable terror in his heart. The instant Su Ming pressed his hand on the boy's head, with his body as the center, the earth and lightning that existed everywhere on the land abruptly surged towards the boy from all directions in a manner that no one could see. Even if he is a soul catcher, there's no possibility of him turning into a vengeful spirit. Because if I fail, his soul would disappear. Everything about him will also be wiped away. It would be better if he was refined into something else. The instant Su Ming replied, a deafening rumble suddenly came from the sky. The clear sky was suddenly covered by dark clouds, and the bolts of lightning in them turned into a large number of light dragons. They illuminated the cracks between the clouds, and at the same time, with a loud crackle, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky, straight towards Su Ming, or more accurately, it charged straight towards the boy beside him. The loud bang sounded as if it had landed straight on Wu Duo's heart. It made his skin crawl. With his own eyes, he saw the boy trembling violently once he was struck by the lightning. His face instantly shriveled up. His screams had already turned hoarse, and there was no longer any maliciousness in his eyes, only a monstrous amount of terror. In fact, there was even a faint plea for mercy. Wu Duo instinctively gulped. His gaze fell on Su Ming, and when he saw how calm he was, a chill rose in his heart. This person is cruel and merciless, and he does things resolutely, and his power is not weak to boot. He has a lot of mysterious treasures, and I've never even glimpsed his arts before. Unless I absolutely have to, I must definitely not bother this sort of person. Even if I am forced to, I still have to avoid him. I cannot face him head on. Wu Duo's attitude had changed multiple times on the way as he saw the things Su Ming did, and now, his impression of him had taken complete form. The rumbling continued in the sky. The bolts of lightning seemed to be attracted to the earth, and they crackled and sliced through the air, descending on the boy beside Su Ming. The rumbling lasted for more than an hour. The bolts of lightning became increasingly stronger as they fell, until eventually, the breadth of each bolt of lightning was about the size of a pail. When they struck down, they looked as if the heavens had become angry and were handing out their punishment. When one particular bolt of lightning fell, Wu Duo became incredibly shocked. He did not hesitate at all and instantly retreated several thousands of feet away, because this time, the bolt of lightning that struck down was purple. The purple bolt of lightning contained a mighty presence that seemed to scream that it would destroy the sky and earth as it charged towards the boy. Su Ming still had his head lifted, looking at the sky. At that moment, he frowned and let out a sigh. He knew that this time, he might not be able to succeed with his refinement. Using this method to create spirit plunder was much more difficult. The purple bolt of lightning closed in on the boy. A violent shudder racked his body, and as the bolt of lightning struck the boy's chest, his body started crumbling, starting from the chest. The part below it instantly turned into ashes, and the part above was shattering apart, inch by inch. Just as the cracks reached his neck, Su Ming shook his head. With his left hand, he grabbed the only part that remained of the boy, his head, and his origin lightning surged into it through the left hand. As it crashed into the bolts of lightning that were rushing down, cracking sounds rang in the air. When the dark clouds in the sky cleared out after a while, Su Ming stood in midair with a head in his left hand. That head belonged to the boy, and there was a burnt area around its throat. There was also a bag made of straw in Su Ming's hands. That item had belonged to the boy. Su Ming had picked it beforehand so that it would not be destroyed. He did not open the straw bag, instead putting it away into his bosom. He turned around and threw the head to the fire ape standing by his side. Then he looked towards Wu Duo. "Pity, I failed." Wu Duo laughed wryly, then looked at Su Ming's bosom. He looked as if he wanted to say something, but eventually chose not to speak. There was an array of mixed feelings and doubts within his heart at that moment. When he casted the shaman tribe's divine ability previously, he had thought that Su Ming was dead for sure. That was why he risked revealing his identity and used the shaman tribe's spell to dissolve the power of the candle dragon. He did not know whether Su Ming had noticed this, but his merciless actions and unknown battle power had increased Wu Duo's wariness of him. The fire ape played around with the boy's head before it tied it around his waist. In fact, just now, even though it looked rather shriveled up, but it still did not forget to go to the destroyed corpse of the man who had previously fought against Su Ming. Once it found that remaining half of the man's head, it tied the remains around its waist. When it turned around, those 5 heads whirled around along with its movements, making it look rather frightening. "Brother Wu, where are the next batch of shamans?" Su Ming asked Wu Duo calmly, putting away his spirit plunders. Green light shone at the center of his brows, and the small sword returned to him. Wu Duo was silent for a moment. He was originally a rather ambitious person to begin with, so when he heard it, a resolute look appeared on his face. He did not try to hide anything anymore and simply pointed into the distance. "There are still shamans about 2,000 leagues away from this place. From the information I have, there should be 2 people there, but perhaps there will also be unexpected situations occurring. Then, should we go?" Su Ming smiled faintly. Wu Duo nodded and wrapped his fist in his palm as a salute towards Su Ming. He traveled before him, and Su Ming followed behind as usual. As for the fire ape, it simply continued following behind with the battle axe across its shoulders. However, its battle axe had already largely melted away when used to block the human-faced, snake-bodied creature's attack just now. Currently, the battle axe's blade was rough and uneven. The staff-shaped handle, however, remained completely unscathed, though no one knew what it was made of. The fire ape followed behind Su Ming. While charging forward, it would occasionally lift up the battle axe and sweep it across its fur as if it was scratching his skin. At one point, it looked like it was struck by an unknown thought and grabbed the broken axe, biting down on it. The blade seemed to have hurt its teeth slightly. Once the fire ape relaxed its bite and lifted its claw, it broke off the blade from the handle, then threw it to the ground. When it did so, it started swinging around the axe handle that was now without a blade. Thankfully, the axe handle was very long, making it look like a long staff. As the fire ape swung it around, it looked like a hero. The staff let out humming sounds as it was swung around, and the ape immediately smiled joyfully because of it. It swung the handle across its shoulders and flew towards Su Ming. The 2 men and the ape flew in the sky, and when evening arrived, they were several thousands of leagues away. After a brief pause, a thunderous boom accompanied by a shrill scream came from that place. When Su Ming and Wu Duo left, 2 extra bloody heads were on the fire ape's waist. This continued all along the way. Su Ming and Wu Duo each had their own needs in this trip, and their coordination became increasingly better. 10 days later, with the fire ape's help and Hefeng's occasional aid, more than 20 heads now hung off the fire ape's body. No one knew how it managed to do it, but none of the heads fell off its body, making it seem as if it was wearing a shirt made of human heads. Wu Duo was not weak to begin with, and along with Su Ming's battle prowess that surpassed his level of cultivation, their coordination could be said to have stirred up a storm of blood within the area belonging to Sky Mist City. Eventually, their efficiency reached such a high level that when Wu Duo went out to search, he would also go out of his way to lure the shaman's attention. Then Su Ming would abruptly charge forward with a speed that made even Wu Duo shocked. At the same time, Wu Duo would also attack. Most of the time, through this process, 1 out of a team of 3 shamans would die, while the other 2 would be heavily injured. There were also cases where 2 would die while the last one got injured. The ones remaining could not even hope to fight back against Su Ming and Wu Duo. This massacre only stopped half a month later, because Sky Mist City was already not too far away from them. Su Ming stood on a low hill. If he looked into the distance from that spot, he could see a majestic and awe-inspiring wall that spanned from the earth to the sky. That aside, there was also a magnificent city that would make anyone's breathing quicken the first time they saw it. Brother Mo, it has been really delightful working with you during these past few days. We didn't get off to a good start, but I hope that you won't mind. Wu Duo stood with quite a large number of dried-up blood patches on his face. He looked rather tired, but his eyes were bright. We're now at Sky Mist City. With your speed, you should be able to get there in no time. I still have some things I need to do, so please excuse. As Wu Duo spoke, a thrumming suddenly came from Sky Mist City's direction. There was a desolate quality to it, but it also made their hearts race, as if there was a strange power contained within that voice. Su Ming was rather familiar with that voice. Wu Duo's expression changed. Chapter 337. Battle. As the thrums resounded in the air, a sound wave that was formed from accumulating the voices of several tens of thousands of people spread in all directions like a bolt of lightning traveling horizontally across the land. Kill them! That shout shook the sky and earth, and even if Su Ming was still a small distance away from Sky Mist City, he could still feel the madness and bloodlust in those voices. If he stood on Sky Mist City, it would definitely be even more shocking. Those voices did not come from berserkers. It's the shout of the shamans attacking the city. Wu Duo took a few steps back instinctively and spoke in a hushed tone. Brother Mo, I'll have to take my leave now. If we are ever fated to meet again, then we will surely run into each other. Take care. Wu Duo lifted his head and cast Su Ming a glance. He and Su Ming originally did not know each other, but the past half a month had indeed been enjoyable for the both of them, and there grew a sort of rapport between them as they worked together. Su Ming also looked at Wu Duo and rapped his fist in his palm towards him. You take care as well. Wu Duo nodded and turned into a long arc that charged in another direction, away from Sky Mist City. The fire ape pursed its lips at Wu Duo, leaving them as it stood behind Su Ming. At that moment, it already had nearly 30 heads tied to its body. It could be said that all the shamans Wu Duo knew of who entered the land using that special method before this were all hanging off its body. The battles in the past half a month had made Su Ming's knowledge towards the shaman tribe increase by quite a large margin. As he averted his gaze from the departing Wu Duo, a contemplative look appeared in his eyes. He knew of Wu Duo's identity. During the past half a month they had been together, and when he had woken up earlier, when he was under the effects of the boy's mystical ability, to see the skills Wu Duo casted, there was in no way that he would not know that Wu Duo was a fledgling thought soothsayer of the shaman tribe. Su Ming also had his suspicions that what he saw was not all of Wu Duo's mystical abilities. There was a high possibility that Wu Duo was the same as Su Ming. He also kept some of his abilities a secret. Yet no matter what, there had only been benefits and not a hint of loss for Su Ming during the half a month they had worked together. They had even grown rather fond of each other after the trip. Su Ming shook his head and no longer mulled over it. After all, he was not a berserker of the land of South Morning, or else, once he learned of Wu Duo's identity, he would have definitely killed him. However, Su Ming believed that there was a more important reason as to why he should pretend not to know of Wu Juo's identity. It doesn't matter whether we are berserkers or shamans in the land of South Morning. When the catastrophe of the eastern wastelands arrives, how many people will survive? Su Ming sighed. Compared to the battle at hand, this matter was still rather far away, and now was not the time to think such heavy thoughts. Once he calmed himself down, muffled rumbles and an endless clatter of battle from the direction of Sky Mist City fell into his ears. A glint appeared in his eyes and he took a leap before charging towards the end of the sky. Standing high in the sky, he looked at Sky Mist City. What he saw shocked him. Su Ming saw a familiar, endless mountain range that looked like a tall wall had been erected on even ground. As it lay on the land, the mountain range looked like a wall, and that was the reason why it was known as the barrier by the berserkers in the land of South Morning. Yet from Su Ming's position, that wall was like two black dragons that were using their bodies to form a ring around the land belonging to the berserkers in the land of South Morning, protecting it within. The spot where the two black dragons' heads met was Su Ming's destination. The name for that spot on the wall was Sky Mist City. It was a gigantic city that was built right on top of Sky Mist Barrier. Its tall walls were like a huge lock that had locked up Sky Mist Barrier, causing the shamans to at most be able to get a few people into the land of the berserkers. Yet for the entire shaman tribe, this was a giant gate that could not be crossed over. The wall was majestic, and the top of it was about hundreds of thousands of feet above the ground. The world around the wall was also filled with distortions, and the distorted ripples were incessantly spreading out. It was as if the sky was using this place as the border. On one side was the sky belonging to the shamans, and on the other was the sky belonging to the berserkers. These two connected skies would never be able to fuse together with each other. Strangely though, the sky of the berserkers spanning tens of thousands of leagues was clear, but the sky belonging to the shamans was dark, with clouds tumbling about like thick smoke. Right on top of the city were two gigantic beast heads stretching from the two opposite sides of Sky Mist Barrier, causing the absent-minded feeling Su Ming had earlier to start becoming real. This was an entirely brown city. Perhaps it had been white many years ago, or perhaps it could have even been black. If it had been white, then the brown hue on the city could only mean that it had been dyed by years of dried blood. If it was black, then it was still dyed brown by the same reason. Over the many years, a large amount of blood had seeped through the walls, turning those black walls to brown. On both sides of the city were three rather small subordinate cities. Together, these 7 cities made up most of Sky Mist City. It only made up most of Sky Mist City because there was another city built 100,000 feet outside Sky Mist Barrier, right in the land of the shamans. That city was similarly tall, similarly awe-inspiring, similarly majestic, but this time, its color was completely blood red. Right in the middle between the two cities was a city wall about several hundreds of thousands of feet tall connecting them together to form a tunnel. That wall shone with a brilliant light and was incredibly sturdy. But that was not all. There were 18 towering statues outside Sky Mist City. Each of the statues were hundreds of thousands of feet tall, and all of them looked different from each other as they stood tall on the ground. No one would believe that the statues in the place were mere decorations. At that moment, right in Su Ming's eyes, he seemed to have seen 4 of the 18 statues glowing with a strange dark light before they started moving slowly. Their large bodies were filled with a presence that could strike terror in people's hearts, especially when they started moving like giants on the ground. With his own eyes, Su Ming saw one of the statues flinging the long whip in its hand. That whip was clearly made of stone, but as it flung out, it moved like a long snake. It let out a snap in the air and brought with it a large amount of blood and flesh. Beside Sky Mist City, Su Ming also saw a gigantic sword floating in the air not too far from the city, on the land of the shamans. The pressure formed by the sword made the air in the area twist. On the edge of the sword was a large amount of small white dots. There also seemed to be a gust of chilling air spreading out from the sword. As he was rather far from the sword, Su Ming could only see that there were a lot of people standing on that sword that was 100,000 feet in size. There were even some who flew off it. There was also an object that was just as large in another direction beyond Sky Mist City. It was a gigantic mirror. Its surface was turned towards the ground, and there were many people standing on its back. The air around the mirror was not distorted, but there was an illusionary sea around it that was letting out the sounds of crashing waves. The sword was Frozen Ice Sky belonging to Freezing Sky Clan, while that mirror belonged to Western Sea Clan. This was what Su Ming saw. This was all that belonged to the Berserkers and Sky Mist City. Yet in his eyes, the distance before him was not occupied only by Berserkers. There were also a countless number of shamans. So numerous and densely packed were they that even if Su Ming stood high in the sky, it was still difficult for him to see the end to them. He saw shamans riding on birds with giant wings, charging towards the city from the skies. Shamans like these covered the sky and earth, and they numbered to tens of thousands. There were also shamans who stood on long fishes shaped like swords. As they flew forward, their hair floated behind their heads, and they brought with them an arrogance filled with a murderous aura. They, too, numbered to nearly 100,000. There were several thousands of shamans standing on gigantic ferocious beasts about thousands of feet in size that could fly in the sky. Their appearances were different, their clothes were different, but they were also filled with an endless amount of brutality towards the Berserkers. There were also dozens of ferocious beasts about 100,000 feet in size roaring as if they were the rulers of the skies. Every single time they moved forward, they would cause a tear in the air that would recover in the blink of an eye. And, right at the end, Su Ming saw two of the shaman's sacred beasts. They were both about 100,000 feet in size. One of them was enveloped in flames and was a gigantic Kirin-like beast. There were flames in its eyes as it stared at Sky Mist City. A man with long, flaming red hair stood on its head. That man had his hands behind his back and simply allowed the wind to mess up his hair as he stared into the distance coldly. The other sacred beast was a scorpion that was just as large. That scorpion was entirely green, and the area around it was also dyed in green. There was a shaman standing on its back as well, and it was an old woman. That was not all. There were a lot more shamans standing on the ground that numbered to more than 100,000. They rode on ferocious black beasts that bounded through the ground. The creatures looked like leopards but were thin as a stick. However, they did not give others a feeling that they were weak. They simply looked as if they were born that way. They charged, roaring, towards Sky Mist at high speed. Behind them, the earth trembled, and there was another type of beast on land that numbered to nearly 100,000, charging forward. Then behind them, Su Ming saw thousands of giants that were several thousands of feet tall. These giants only had one arm that grew out of their chest. They did not have heads, but on the palm attached to their arm was a single eye that sparkled brilliantly. There was not one but 7 to 8 shamans standing on them. There were many more shamans that did not possess any ferocious beasts behind those giants. However, their cries for murder shook the skies as they dashed and leaped towards Sky Mist City. And right at the end, Su Ming saw something that shocked him to the core, another gigantic beast 100,000 feet in size. That creature did not fly but was sitting on the ground. Its face was that of a giant python and its cold eyes sparkled. A young man sat on top of its head. That young man wore a long robe and had long hair. His face was like that of a woman's. He looked incredibly beautiful, but there was a ghastly smile on his lips. And even that wasn't all Su Ming saw. Right behind the 3 beasts that were 100,000 feet in size, as the endless amount of dark clouds tumbled about like a layer of black fog, he saw the mackerel pike that had once shocked him to the core. It used the sky as its sea and leaped onto the shore. Its gargantuan body was hidden within the sea of clouds, and its size could no longer be measured by feet, only by li. The thrums Su Ming and Wu Duo heard previously, the sound that was familiar to Su Ming, came from that mackerel pike. There was a woman on that fish. The woman's face could not be seen, but when the mackerel pike leaped out of the sky, her elegant figure could be seen through the sea of clouds. Su Ming was shocked by the battlefield right before his eyes. This was the first time he saw such a large-scale battle. This sort of shocking impact to his mind made him feel as if he was about to suffocate. After a long while, a glint appeared in his eyes and he took a step forward, turning into a long arc that charged towards Sky Mist City. He would join the battle. Chapter 338. Joining the Fray. The fire ape followed right behind Su Ming. As it moved, the dozens of heads on its body started floating about, turning into an incredibly powerful murderous aura that surrounded the area, causing the ape to look as if it had just walked out of hell, making all those who saw it to be terrified. The man and ape charged towards Sky Mist City. As they got closer, sounds of battle reached their ears from afar and grew increasingly clearer. Su Ming's expression became grim. The shock brought from seeing and hearing the thousands upon thousands of people fighting and killing each other would either crush a person's mind and he'd succumb to terror, or bring about an agitation and hot-bloodedness that could not be controlled within that person. Su Ming belonged to the former and also the latter. He was afraid, but his will to fight surpassed his fear. He was not fighting for the berserkers in the land of South Morning, not for Sky Mist, much less for Freezing Sky Clan. He was fighting for the 9th summit, for the road to return home, for becoming stronger. He was fighting for himself. Su Ming got closer and the sounds of battle from beyond Sky Mist City fell into his ears clearly. He and the fire ape behind him had already arrived at Sky Mist City. Right before them was a winding staircase situated under the majestic city. That staircase was practically stuck to the city walls, allowing people to walk on them. There was a swarm of berserkers floating closely to each other in the air, protecting the city. Su Ming and the fire ape's arrival had long since attracted some of the attention from those in Sky Mist City, especially the ones fighting to protect the city in midair. They belonged to Sky Mist City. When they were not in battle, their duty was to ensure the city's safety. While a large number of them had already gone into the battlefield to fight, but those who had been switched out were still fulfilling their duties perfectly. When Su Ming got closer, some of those calm-looking guards who seemed to have already gotten used to war a long time ago turned their heads around to cast a glance at his approach. "Stop him and make sure you know which tribe he comes from. We're now at war. We cannot allow anyone invading our land from behind us." One of them, a person who clearly had higher authority, ordered coldly. The moment he spoke, 2 guards immediately wrapped their fists in their palms and voiced their obedience before turning into long arcs that charged towards Su Ming. "Stranger, stop and tell us your tribe." Once the 2 guards flew into the sky towards the part of Sky Mist City that was located beyond the wall, one of them spoke to the incoming Su Ming with an aloof tone. Su Ming also saw those 2 men. Right behind them was the majestic Sky Mist City. The sounds of battle were deafening and lingered in the air, refusing to disappear. When Su Ming was about several hundreds of feet away from the 2 men, he stopped and wrapped his fist in his palm in a salute to them. "I am Su Ming, from Freezing Sky Clan." When the 2 guards heard Su Ming's words, they gave him a look, and the person who spoke previously let out a cold harumph. "Ridiculous. Freezing Sky Clan arrived half a month ago. If you're really from Freezing Sky Clan, then why didn't you come with them?" "I was stalled by something on the way, that's why." Su Ming was about to explain himself, but was interrupted by the Sky Mist Guard who had first spoken previously. "I don't need your explanations, and I don't care where you come from. Right now, the berserkers and shamans are at war. We will not allow strangers getting near the city. Leave quickly. Once this battle is over and you're really from Freezing Sky Clan, I will report your existence to the authorities and allow you into the city." The person who spoke was a man in his 40s. He wore a blue robe that was stained with blood. He looked rather exhausted, a clear sign that he had just returned from the battlefield. The other person was about the same age and there was also exhaustion on his face, but his eyes shone with a freezing glint. That cold stare was not aimed at Su Ming but was born due to the battle. Su Ming fell silent and his gaze moved to the land of the shamans located in the distance. Over there, the battle had reached a monstrous height. Even with the distance between them, Su Ming could see a berserker getting beheaded by a shaman. His head was lifted into the air, and the shaman howled as he rushed forward. There were also numerous casualties among the shamans on the battlefield. Yet those ferocious beasts would usually need several berserkers launching an attack on all fronts before they could be subdued. The roars from the beasts could be heard echoing on the gigantic battlefield. Su Ming wanted to join the fray. Only going through multiple encounters with death in this place that was the most suitable for him to train could he arrive at a breakthrough and move into the bone sacrifice realm from the awakening realm. However, he was late. He was a latecomer to this battle, and there was no one who could prove his identity. It would be impossible for him to join the battle now. Even if someone managed to recognize him, that someone had to be a powerful berserker belonging to the older generation within Freezing Sky Clan. If it was anyone else, their words would bear no weight, and they would not be able to bring a large effect during this period of war. Still not leaving. The man with the blood-soaked blue robe hissed darkly, killing intent rising in his eyes. Due to the two guards spending too much time talking to Su Ming, more people from Sky Mist City looked over. Su Ming sighed and took a few steps back. Yet right as he retreated, suddenly, a loud bang came from Sky Mist City's direction. That bang shook the sky and earth, and a large crack appeared in the air above Sky Mist City. That crack was not real but was caught in a state of being an illusion and a real entity as it continued shining. The instant that crack appeared, the expressions of the guards protecting Sky Mist City changed. At the same time, an old voice reverberated through Sky Mist City. That is the imagination spell cast by an end-split dawn. They can create a point of relocation connected to the land of the shamans. This spell cannot be broken, but even an end-split dawn would need half a year before he or she could cast it once. Once we win against the shamans who walk out of that crack, within half a year, no other attacks like this would appear again. Brother Kai, my dear friend Ran, little brother Ju, this is the reason why I kept the three of you here instead of letting you fight on the battlefield. As the old voice echoed in the air, instantly, 4 people stepped out of Sky Mist City. 3 among the 4 were white-haired old men, the other was a black-robed middle-aged man. Once the 4 people walked out, immediately, an incredible pressure spread out from them. Almost the instant they walked out, rumbling sounds came from within the crack in the sky, and then, it was abruptly torn apart. As the crack was ripped open, a roar came from within and an aquatic dragon about several tens of thousands of feet long pushed its head out, and with one bound, rushed out of the crack. Right behind the aquatic dragon came laughter. 3 people flew out from within the crack. All 3 of these people looked identical. They were all thin as bones and there were brilliantly colored pictures drawn on their bodies. Each of them held a bone cane in their hands, and the instant they flew out, a gust of black mist spread out. The moment the 3 people and the aquatic dragon appeared, the 4 people out of Sky Mist City closed in on them. Without even a word, as the rumbling sounds echoed in the air, they stood together. The weather changed. The wind and clouds tumbled backwards. Rumbling sounds shook the land all around them, and at the same time, dozens upon dozens of people shot out from the crack in the sky. All of them were shamans, and in the blink of an eye, hundreds of shamans had appeared from within the crack. All the shamans that had rushed out possessed extraordinary power. Kill them! The guards in midair charged forward without any hesitation, immediately engaging in a battle to the death with the shamans who walked out of the crack. More people flew up from the ground of Sky Mist City and charged towards the smaller-scaled battlefield that was as devastating as the one beyond the wall. The sounds of battle filled the sky, and the sky and earth darkened as if the sun and moon had lost their light. The 2 guards who had previously prevented Su Ming from joining the fray could no longer be bothered with him, as their expressions changed and they moved back to charge towards that battlefield. That battle was happening in a spot less than 50,000 feet away from Su Ming. The level of devastation there was so great that even though the battle had just begun, shrill screams could already be heard. A lot of people had already exploded, and some of them were even torn from limb to limb. Some of these people were berserkers, some were shamans. This was not a direct conflict between 2 people. This was a battlefield. All of these people were not facing just one enemy but an innumerable amount of foes that filled the sky and earth. When you killed one person, you would have to be careful of the other's divine abilities, coming from non-berserkers charging towards you. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He did not continue retreating. Instead, as the fire ape bared its teeth and was about to rush out, he lifted his right hand and waved his arm towards the fire ape. Immediately, an incredibly hurt look flashed through its face and it was put away into the bag. This was going to be a grueling battle. Su Ming was worried about letting the fire ape fight. Once the ape killed to a frenzy, it would descend into madness, and it would definitely not be able to protect itself. When Su Ming put away the fire ape, he took a step towards the battlefield that was only 50,000 feet away from him. His body seemed to not have moved after he took that one step. He looked as if he was still making the action of taking a step, but in truth, his speed had already reached its peak. The guard whose robes were stained with blood and who also happened to be the guard who had spoken to Su Ming among the two sent to block his path had his 5 fingers lifted to seize the air before himself. 5 wisps of mist swirled behind his back and turned into a 5-colored spider that rammed into the shaman, closing in on him. That shaman was also an extraordinary fighter. The moment he died, he also made the 5-colored spider explode. In fact, as his body let out thunderous rumbles signaling his death, he flicked out a fingernail that pierced through the guard's chest, causing blood to seep out of the corners of his lips and forcing him to retreat. Yet the moment he retreated, a battle axe suddenly appeared by his side. It belonged to a warrior in the shaman tribe. With a vicious laugh, the man swung his axe down. The guard's eyes were instantly lit with madness and he looked as if he was about to self-destruct. The instant the thought of that even if he died, he had to kill more people appeared in his head, the space beside him suddenly distorted and the youth from before suddenly showed up. As Su Ming appeared, green light flashed at the center of his brows. His divine general armor swiftly manifested on his body, and the moment the shaman swung his axe down, he thrust his sword forward. Chapter 339. Welcome to Sky Mist City. The guard was not the only one caught off guard by Su Ming's arrival. The shaman had found it hard to notice him too. Yet that shaman was clearly someone who was used to fighting. Without a hint of hesitation, he laughed viciously and swung the axe towards Su Ming instead. In the blink of an eye, that axe was already less than 1 foot away its target. Su Ming stood there calmly. The small virescent sword in his right hand shone brilliantly, and the moment the shaman's axe swung down on his head, Su Ming thrust the sword towards the center of the man's brows. To the eyes of those watching, it was clear that these two were fighting to see who was more vicious. As if the one who was more vicious would come out of this duel alive. If the man was the first to be afraid and dodged the attack, then while it would be troublesome that he wouldn't have managed to kill this person with his attack, it would still be better than dying. Yet if Su Ming became afraid and chose to avoid the attack, then he would immediately lose the initiative and the shaman would definitely attack him with a force that would be difficult for him to block. However, if the both of them did not move away, then they would surely die together. The guard behind Su Ming was momentarily stunned. He was already prepared to self-destruct, so he did not expect that the person he had just prevented to join the battle would suddenly appear right before him. With just one glance, the man even recognized the armor on Su Ming's body. It was the divine general armor. He hadn't managed to say anything before madness appeared in the shaman's eyes. He was completely unbothered by the small virescent sword charging to the center of his brows. With a bang, the axe fell on Su Ming's body. Boom! As the bang reverberated through the air, Su Ming flinched and staggered a few steps backwards. Blood trickled out of his mouth, but there was not a hint of injury on his body. His shoulder armor was cut by the axe, but there was only a crack on it, and even that was closing up rapidly. As for the shaman, he did not have a chance to see this. Madness still lingering on his face, a hole could be seen at the center of his brows. Blood poured out from that hole, but it wasn't what killed him. It was a knife that had suddenly come from behind him the instant he swung his axe down. The knife cut through his neck swiftly, causing his head to be severed by the person behind just as the center of his brows was pierced through. The small virescent sword pierced through the shaman's head and brushed past the person who had suddenly appeared behind him. A fine line of blood was left behind on his face. Su Ming knew the person who had appeared behind the shaman before. He was the other of the 2 guards who had previously prevented him from joining the battle. The middle-aged man's gaze was cold and his expression aloof. He was completely unbothered by the gash on his face. Instead, he cast Su Ming a glance and a smile appeared on his lips. That smile held a hint of ferociousness, but there was no ill will contained within. Welcome to Sky Mist City. As he spoke, he threw the head in his hand towards Su Ming. Once Su Ming caught it, that person turned around, and with a flash, he charged towards another shaman. Keep their heads. That's an important proof for us when we're recording your war achievements. The voice of the guard Su Ming had just saved came from his side. The man looked rather touched as he smiled heartily. Thank goodness I didn't have you leave the place yet, or else I'd have died here. My name is Zhong Qian-ta. Welcome to Sky Mist City. The man let out a boisterous laugh and lifted his right hand. Su Ming too lifted his right hand, and once they gave each other a high five, they parted ways and charged into two different locations on the battlefield. With that high five, Su Ming felt a wave of tremors belonging to a life force traveling up his hand. Those tremors came from Zhong Qianta and belonged to the battlefield filled with murder and carnage. As he turned around, red appeared in Su Ming's right eye. Black mist surrounded his body, covering his divine general armor in runes, allowing his defense to reach an incredibly powerful state. Su Ming's Han Mountain Bell also appeared under his divine general armor, albeit only in an indistinct form. With that bell, his defense could increase by another fold. Green light shone by his side. It was the small virescent sword, charging, swirling around him. As he moved forward, Su Ming ran into a male shaman. That shaman wore a sackcloth. His right hand was dark and there was a small red snake biting his hand as if it was injecting poison into his veins. His left arm was not black but swollen. There was a multicolored scorpion climbing his left hand, and it looked as if it also had its fangs buried deep in his skin. There was an enticing totem on the young man's face. Su Ming could not see it clearly, but there was a sort of brutality coming from it. Before he rushed at Su Ming, the young man had just killed a berserker. Once he retrieved the berserker's head, he rushed towards Su Ming with a vicious sneer. The two of them closed in on each other in the span of a breath. A flash of green appeared and charged towards the shaman's head, but the shaman let out a roar and lifted his right hand. The moment his hand touched the small sword, that person's right arm instantly exploded and turned into a large amount of black liquid that sprayed everywhere. When the small sword touched the black liquid, instantly, there were sizzling sounds and it started swaying. At the same moment, when the black liquid fell on Su Ming's divine general armor, dents appeared on it as if the liquid was corroding it. At the very least, Su Ming's Han Mountain Bell could still block the poisonous liquid from touching him. The young man's right arm had originally disappeared, but the stump was wiggling around bizarrely as if it was growing into an arm again. The man increased his speed, and in the blink of an eye, he had already closed in on Su Ming. He opened his mouth and spat out a layer of poisonous fog. That poisonous fog turned into a ghost's face before it charged towards Su Ming. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He took a few steps backwards, and with a cold sneer, he charged forward. He looked as if he was charging straight into the poisonous fog, but in truth, in the short distance he traveled when he took the few steps backward and charged forward again, with his incredible speed, he could stir up a huge gust of wind. That fog may be strange in a sense that a normal gust of wind couldn't blow it away, but the wind caused by Su Ming's intense speed straight up blew it away. Su Ming then shot through the fog and appeared right behind the young man. Using the instant his opponent was caught off guard, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pressed his palm on his head. His power in the later stage of the awakening realm surged into the young man's body. The swaying small virescent sword also charged through and stabbed the man's throat. At that instant, Su Ming tore the man's head away from his body. When the young man's headless corpse fell to the ground, Su Ming held his head in a hand with a pale face, but his eyes were freezing cold. His breathing had quickened slightly. All around him were the shouts of people crying out to kill each other. Shrill screams of pain reverberated in the air, never dying down. Right when Su Ming stopped moving, a flash of yellow light came from behind him. There was a diamond-shaped beast bone in that light, and it was incredibly sharp. Su Ming was still immersed in his first experience of this kind of a battlefield when a bone stabbed into his back, right above his heart. Even if he had the divine general armor blocking the attack, Su Ming still staggered a few steps forward. Blood flowed out of his mouth. He turned around swiftly and stared at the spot where the diamond-shaped beast bone came from. Over there, in the crowd where the two armies were slaughtering each other, were two shamans working together to attack an old berserker. One of the two was tall, and the other short. Their cries of battle had fused with the sounds around them and could not be heard clearly. That old man's face was pale and his hair was stained with fresh blood. He was being forced backwards. That beast bone that had charged towards Su Ming was not actually aimed at him but was sent his way when the old man dodged it. Right at the top of this battlefield that contained less than 1,000 people was a mass of darkness that hid the color of the sky, and the booming sounds grew increasingly stronger. As the black fog tumbled about, Su Ming could see an aquatic dragon occasionally revealing its body and roaring relentlessly. Fighting against the aquatic dragon was a middle-aged man from among the 4 powerful berserkers that had stepped out of Sky Mist City previously. The other 3 people were fighting against 3 identical great shamans in the black fog. Their level of cultivation had already surpassed that of the Bone Sacrifice realm, and they were all already in the Berserker Soul realm. However, they were merely berserkers in the initial stage of the Berserker Soul realm. The difference in power in each stage of the Berserker Soul realm was so big that it was similar to the power gap between 2 realms. Su Ming stared at the 2 shamans in the crowd, and a blood-red light shining with killing intent appeared in his eyes. He took 1 step forward, and in the span of a breath, he disappeared. Almost the instant he disappeared, a shaman rammed his fist into the afterimage left behind by Su Ming when he left. That person was momentarily stunned after he threw that punch, but he did not have any chance to think any further. A berserker not too far in the distance had chosen to self-destruct. The waves caused by the explosion surged in all directions. When the waves crashed into that shaman, he was forced backwards and died, shot by an arrow that was flicked off in his direction from somewhere. Su Ming traveled so quickly that he shot through multiple people fighting against each other and appeared right behind the 2 shamans who were fighting against the old berserker. The faces of the 2 shamans were colored by madness. Their coordination was flawless, and there had been more than 10 berserkers who had died in their hands in this massacre. At that moment, the number of kills they had netted increased by 1. The shorter shaman moved, and passing through the old man's side, he took his head away with him. With the old man's head in his hand, the shorter shaman grinned and laughed out loud, but the moment his laughter begun, his companion, who had been smiling with him, suddenly widened his eyes, then rushed towards him, crying out loud. Right behind the shorter shaman was Su Ming, taking 1 step to reach behind his back. His eyes were blood-red, and the moment he appeared, green light flashed and shot through the shaman's back, right through his heart. The green light took a sharp turn back, then pierced through the center of that shaman's brows. That person had extraordinary power, but on the battlefield, while a person's level of cultivation could help them, it would not be able to aid them fully. Luck, resolution, caution, observation, and all the other factors were keys in determining whether a person would be able to survive. None of these could be missing. Once Su Ming killed the shorter shaman, a chilling glare grew in his eyes when the deceased's companion charged towards him with a roar. He Feng. The moment Su Ming opened his mouth, a dark shadow instantly appeared right behind the incoming shaman. That shadow devoured him like a giant mouth. Su Ming was not bothered by what would happen to the person next. With a single move, he charged in another direction. Once you control him, destroy his appearance and the totem symbolizing his identity as a shaman. After that, come with me. Once Su Ming left, his aloof command fell into He Feng's ears. Chapter 340, First Battle. In the air above Sky Mist City was the battlefield that contained the intense battle between nearly 1,000 people. As time passed by and the number of deaths increased, a mangled corpse fell from the sky. The area of battle should have become increasingly smaller, but that was not the case. Instead, the area became slightly larger, because this was Sky Mist City. The number of berserkers here was so great that it was simply unimaginable. The battle in the sky was only a minuscule and insignificant part of the entire battlefield. Besides, the large amount of shamans dying had made their numbers to be unable to compare to the number of berserkers here, whose numbers had been increasing incessantly as more warriors joined the fray, since this battle was held right above their turf. That was why, even though the number of shamans was dwindling, the area of this battlefield still increased slightly. However, the battle in the area was only a tiny portion of this small-scale battle. The main event was not held here, but in the black fog high above. At that moment, as booming sounds echoed in the air, 4 towering statues of the god of berserkers appeared within the black fog. The 4 statues belonged to the 4 powerful berserkers in the Berserker Soul realm. These statues did not seem to contain physical form and seemed like mere illusions, as if they would scatter away when wind blew against them and were just the products of imagination. Those in the Berserker Soul realm could gather up their power to form their own statue of the god of berserkers. This was the power that caused those in the Berserker Soul realm to be so powerful that those in the Bone Sacrifice realm could not hope to compare. In all their minds, only those within the Berserker Soul realm could hope to kill another in the same realm. The battle in the black fog had reached its climax, and the battle between the berserkers and shamans underneath the black fog had already almost reached its end as well. The shamans fell one after another, and the ferocious beasts they summoned, too, died in succession. Su Ming's robes had already been dyed red. Even if someone could tell that his robes were not originally colored red, they would still be able to sense a sort of bloodthirst and madness coming from them that would make their skins crawl. It would be especially so if they looked into Su Ming's eyes. The calmness in his left eye and the blood-red hue in his right eye, the dancing of his no longer black hair in the wind, the green light from his sword surrounding him, and also the blooded and mangled puppet with the shabby clothes following behind him. All of these things turned him into a strange sight that caught everyone's attention in this small-scale battle. Because no matter where this person went to, and no matter what sort of power the shaman had, all of them would die horrible deaths. Even if the shaman was already a medial shaman, this person would usually just need to lift his right hand, and the bracelet on his wrist would turn into a swarm of black smoke that would surround the shaman, and from then, it would be difficult for the shaman to escape death. It was a presence that screamed of nigh invulnerability, a murderous aura that was formed after slaughtering too many people. A large amount of souls seemed to have gathered on the blood-soaked robe, causing whimpering cries to echo around Su Ming as he walked. On that day, many people took note of this person. Besides that nigh invulnerable presence he gave off, they also remembered him because whenever he appeared, he would usually save a life that belonged to a berserker. He seemed to be a person used to silence. Su Ming did not roar on the battlefield, neither did he laugh arrogantly. He kept his silence and kept on with his slaughter. At that moment, Su Ming appeared before a shaman, and when that shaman saw him, his expression instantly changed drastically. He quickly retreated, because he had seen Su Ming attack 3 times, and each time, one of his own would die, and among the 3 people who died, one of them was even a medial shaman who was equivalent to a berserker in the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm. Yet that shaman had only managed to take 3 steps back when all the hairs on his body stood up. Su Ming appeared right behind him like a ghost, then with one cold slash of his sword, he turned around. When he left, He Feng, who was behind him, laughed darkly and attacked the shaman. Su Ming rained down carnage as he walked through the battlefield. He had no idea how many people he had killed. His divine general armor had crumbled several times during the battle. Even with the runes defending him, it still happened regardless. He could no longer use the smoke to form the runes when his armor appeared once again. His defense might have weakened, but the murderous aura around him was etched onto all the minds of those within the battlefield, making him seem to have an invisible set of armor on his person. He had already swallowed down a lot of medicine, which was the sole reason why he could continue fighting, or else it would have been difficult for him to last on this battlefield, where no one fought against another alone. Fortunately, Su Ming had prepared quite a lot of medicine. He appeared behind a shaman and rammed his body hard against his. Once he blew that already heavily injured shaman into smithereens, Su Ming, who was just about to leave, suddenly stopped moving. He slowly lifted his head and looked towards a person standing several thousands of feet away in the battlefield. That person looked to be his 30s and was half naked. His entire body was dyed in blood and exuded a powerful and bold presence. It was a shaman. In his hands he held the body of a male berserker and had his teeth buried deep into his neck as if he was sucking away the man's blood. It flowed down the body and dripped down the shaman's mouth. He was staring coldly at Su Ming, then lifted his head from the captured man's neck before tearing off his head from his body. He lifted the head high into the sky, causing the blood dripping down to fall into his own mouth. Su Ming knew that deceased berserker. He was Zhong Qianta's aloof companion, who also happened to be the first person to welcome Su Ming. Even when the man died, his eyes were still aloof and indifferent. Su Ming watched this sight, watched as the shaman pointed at him with a finger of his left hand, then licked his lips and moved his mouth as if saying something, but his words were drowned out by the sounds of battle all around them. Su Ming could not hear him. However, he could still tell what the male shaman wanted to do, because once he threw the head away, he suddenly walked towards him. He was not slow, and as he moved, he charged towards Su Ming while stirring up a huge and violent gust of wind. As he moved forward, a large amount of shadows manifested behind him. All of those shadows belonged to the berserkers he'd killed, and one of them was Zhong Qianta's companion. There were more than 20 of these shadows, and as they surrounded him, they looked as if they were ghosts that were accompanying this person as he charged towards Su Ming. Spirit medium. Su Ming's pupils shrank and he charged forward, bringing an even more powerful and violent gust of wind that blew in all directions as he rushed towards the man. The distance between these two continued diminishing, and after a moment, the instant they crashed into each other, they started fighting. As the man attacked, a large amount of vengeful spirits would charge forward. Some of these vengeful spirits belonged to berserkers, and some to the shamans. Su Ming was not the only one engaged in such a battle. Dozens of similar battles had begun on this battlefield, because all the shamans that had survived up to this point were all spirit mediums. A spirit medium's battle prowess would be largely limited if he or she was placed in a place that did not have a large amount of dead people. However, when they were in a battlefield where a large amount of people had died, then spirit mediums would become incredibly powerful. This was a tactic unique only to spirit mediums. Booming sounds echoed on the battlefield. After a moment, as the people were all engaged in battle against each other, the black fog in the sky was blown open as if someone had just torn it apart, as if a pair of invisible hands had ripped it to shreds. The booming sounds reverberated in the sky, and then the aquatic dragon exploded. Letting out a shrill screech, it turned into a large amount of blood mist that carried the three identical old shamans away and back to the land of the shamans like a shield made of blood. Two of the four powerful berserkers from Sky Mist City were about to chase them down when the middle-aged man by their side lifted his hand and stopped them with a grim look on his face. "My fellow tribesmen, we cannot give chase. The shaman's goal might be to enter our land, but they would first need to destroy Sky Mist City and occupy it, or else, even those old monsters belonging to the upper level of authority in the shaman tribe would have to hesitate. Also, there's something off about this. An End-Split Dawn can only cast a relocation spell like this once every half a year. Why were there only 3 End Shamans and 1 inferior sacred beast? From our plans and calculations along with some of the information we obtained, there is only 1 pair of End-Split Dawns in the shaman tribe. They only had a single chance like this. They should have sent much more firepower. We of Sky Mist City made detailed preparations for this, but now, the prey isn't here and we can't use it." The middle-aged man frowned. "Are you saying that they're intentionally baiting us to pursue them?" One of the 4 old monsters in the Berserker Soul Realm, who was a hunchbacked old man, asked in raspy voice. "About that." The middle-aged man was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed drastically. The other 3 old men beside him also experienced changes in their expressions, because at that moment, on the gigantic battlefield outside Sky Mist City, as the sounds of battle were so great they seemed to have filled heaven and earth, in 5 different locations in the sky, the same crack that had appeared right in the sky above Sky Mist City just materialized. But that was not all. Right behind Sky Mist City, in the sky that belonged to the Berserkers, cracks also appeared, and this time, it was not 1 but 2. These 2 gigantic cracks, along with the 5 cracks in the sky belonging to the shamans, started shining brilliantly at the same time. A dark look instantly appeared on the middle-aged man's face. With one move, he charged towards the area down below. "I'll leave the cracks in our land to the 3 of you." As the middle-aged man's voice echoed in the air, his body flashed several dozen times among the crowd fighting underneath. Each time his body shone, he would appear beside a spirit medium, and no matter what spell that spirit medium casted next, and no matter how strong their mystical ability was, when that middle-aged man appeared, they would die from a jab of his finger right through the center of their brows. The middle-aged man traveled so quickly that in the blink of an eye, he had already come to right beside Su Ming. Yet the moment he appeared, the shaman that had been fighting against Su Ming coughed out blood and was ripped from limb to limb. This was not due to the middle-aged man but Su Ming, who was putting down his right hand slowly after drawing the 1 slash for berserker obliteration. Su Ming's face was pale and he breathed raggedly. Only he knew just how dangerous the battle had been. The middle-aged man gave Su Ming a look, nodded, then vanished. After a moment, when he reappeared in midair, all the spirit mediums in the battlefield had died. You, and you, the 7 of you, follow me. The rest of you, go to the battlefield over there." The middle-aged man pointed towards the cracks that had appeared in the land of the berserkers far in the distance. As he pointed forward, the group of people instantly rushed out, and under the guidance of the 3 powerful berserkers in the Berserker Soul Realm standing in the sky, they charged towards the 2 cracks. More people flew out from Sky Mist City and joined them. There were even 2 old men in white joining them. As they moved forward, the air underneath their feet trembled, and the statue of the god of berserkers manifested in the form of an illusion behind them. These two people were also berserkers in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm. The two of them flew into the sky and exchanged greetings with the previous three berserkers in the form of wrapping their fists in their palms before all of them walked towards the cracks grimly. Su Ming did not move, because he was among the 7 people the middle-aged man had chosen to stay. The middle-aged man's gaze swept through the 7 of them like lightning before stopping at Su Ming. The 7 of you had the best performance in the battle just now. I've seen all of the others before, but you're rather unfamiliar. What is your name and from which tribe or clan did you come from?